Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and this week we're diving into the most creepy, kooky, mysterious, spooky, and ooky movie ever made. A movie that survived production chaos and nearly bankrupting a studio, the movie that made an entire generation idolize Gomez and Morticia, turned Wednesday into a generational icon, and created a legacy that even Netflix hasn't really been able to beat. That's right, today we are talking about 1991's The Addams Family, how it almost didn't get made, and why this movie still captures our imagination in ways that no other Addams Family project has been able to do since. I mean, I could honestly do like a whole video just on the chemistry between Anjelica Huston and Raul Julia because, I mean, come on. But this movie was never supposed to work. In fact, nobody was even talking about the Addams Family in 1990. The original TV show wasn't being syndicated, Charles Addams had passed away a few years prior, and the rights were owned both by Orion Pictures and Addams' widow, who was in no rush to hand them over. But somehow, Orion secured the additional rights and hired Scott Rudin to produce the movie with a budget of $25 million, though it immediately went $5 million over budget, and because Orion had had a string of flops recently, the movie put them in significant financial risk of going under, but more on this in a bit. But Rudin was smart because he hired Barry Sonnenfeld, a cinematographer who'd worked on movies like Blood Simple, Miller's Crossing, and Misery, a decision that I think really helped this movie have a distinct visual style that set it apart from other movies at the time. Certainly the other vintage TV reboots that would come out of the 1990s. Originally, Sonnenfeld had absolutely no interest in directing the movie or even being a director in general, but curiosity got the better of him and he agreed to read the script, and when he did, he remembered how much he loved both the cartoons and the 60s TV show. Unfortunately though, he hated the script, so the original screenwriters Carolyn Thompson and Larry Wilson were both fired from the project, and Paul Rudnick was hired to rewrite the script, although Thompson and Wilson are the only credited screenwriters on the movie. But if you really want to know what makes this movie special, it's the little things, like the way that Morticia always has her own motivated eye light, or how Pugsley and Wednesday are always trying to hurt each other, but never in a malicious way, and it's the Mamushka dance. Mamushka! Mamushka! As for me, I remember my dad renting both this and Addams Family Values to show my brother and I in the mid-90s. I remember being pretty immediately obsessed with the beautifully gothic and kooky world that they created. I did watch the TV show a bit as a kid, but this version of the Addams Family just immediately became the definitive version of the characters to me and became part of my movie DNA, especially once they started playing on cable all the time, which is where I feel like most millennials really discovered the movie. And nearly everything in this movie was done in camera. I think there's really only one blue screen shot in the entire movie. It's crazy to me how we used to treat movies like this as being second tier, and now this would be immediately hailed as a camp classic and for being entirely practical. From the sets to the effects, all of it works together to create the iconic movie we all know and love today. And before we go any further, just a reminder, Born to Rant is made entirely by me, a real person. No AI, no corporate backing. If you want to help keep this kind of work alive and get access to exclusive perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below. The Addams Family didn't start with movies, or even names for that matter. They began in 1938 as a single-panel cartoon in The New Yorker, where Charles Addams spent the next 50 years drawing this kooky, nameless family. It wasn't until 1964 that they became a TV show that Addams would finally give names to all of his characters. So why would anyone want to try and turn this into a $25 million production? Well, after Scott Rudin had been able to get Fox interested in making an Addams Family movie, Orion decided that, well, that just kind of sounded like a good idea, so they scrapped their original plans for relaunching the TV show and hired the now freelance Rudin to come on board as the movie's producer. Cinematographer Barry Sonnenfeld was brought in to direct the movie, even though hiring him with no previous directing experience was a huge risk. It also made finding the right cinematographer for the movie incredibly difficult because no one wanted to be the one to argue lighting with the guy that shot Miller's Crossing. Although Sonnenfeld really only had 3 requests for a cinematographer. He wanted to be able to pick the lenses, use a slower film stock to really enhance the dark gothic color palette of the movie, and he wanted Morticia to always have her own motivated eye light that was reminiscent of the old Universal monster movies.
Unhappy, darling?
Oh, yes.
Owen Roizman, who'd been the cinematographer on movies like The Exorcist and Tootsie, was sold on that vision and came on board as his cinematographer. Unfortunately, Roizman would leave the production with 3 months of filming left to go. They replaced him with Gail Tattersall, who only ended up working on the movie for a few weeks before a medical emergency forced Gail to leave production. With no one else, Sonnenfeld stepped up and acted as the movie's cinematographer for the last 2-ish months of production, although Roizman is the only credited cinematographer. As far as casting goes, Raul Julia signed on first and was so perfectly cast that the rest of the production really anchored around him. Anjelica Huston was really excited to have the chance to work with Raul and was also a longtime fan of the original Addams Family newspaper cartoons, even claiming she used to dress up and play Morticia all the time as a kid. Jimmy Workman was cast as Pugsley after his sister Chanel Workman came into audition for Wednesday and mentioned that people told her brother all the time that he looked exactly like Pugsley. They asked her to send him up and, well, he was given the part. And Christina Ricci didn't just play Wednesday, she helped rewrite the movie. Actually, just a real quick spoiler warning, I'm about to spoil the twist of the Addams Family, so if you've never seen this nearly 35-year-old movie and don't want the twist spoiled, go watch the movie and then come back here. Okay, so one of my favorite stories I found while doing research for this video is that after the first table read, the main cast all agreed that the ending where Gordon ended up being a Fester imposter was a mistake. So they elected 10-year-old Christina Ricci to go to Sonnenfeld and explain their concerns, which she did, and Sonnenfeld immediately agreed to change the ending. And in November of 1990, the Addams Family went into production with a budget of $25 million. And as you can probably tell from some of the stories I've already told, production for this movie did not go smooth. It went over schedule and budget, even leading to the near bankruptcy of Orion Pictures. As it turns out, Sonnenfeld is an incredibly anxious filmmaker, admitting that he threw up no less than 17 times while shooting Blood Simple, and the Addams Family saw him losing weight from stress and passing out on set from exhaustion. Raul Julia also had to be rushed to the hospital for a burst blood vessel in his eye, and Anjelica Huston's costume was so uncomfortable and demanding that it caused daily migraines for her if she didn't periodically sit down. The craziest thing is that to get her eyes to slant upwards at the sides, they had to attach an elastic strap to the back of her head via tabs glued at her temples, which pulled the corners of her eye upwards, which sounds like absolute torture to me. As far as post-production on the movie is concerned, there are two big stories here. The first is that towards the end of production, Orion Pictures got cold feet because the movie had gone $5 million over budget, and since they had a recent string of flops and were eyeing bankruptcy, they decided to cut their losses and sold the entire production to Paramount Pictures, who would own the domestic distribution rights. The other big story is that the Mamushka sequence towards the end of the movie was originally much longer. However, test audiences really felt like the musical sequence really brought the flow of the movie to a grinding halt, so the decision was made to shorten it, although you can still see the full sequence as a bonus feature on the DVD and Blu-ray copies of the movie. And finally, on November 22nd, 1991, The Addams Family was released into theaters, where it made $24.2 million against its $30 million budget and placed first at the box office. The movie would go on to make a worldwide total of $191.5 million, making it a giant hit for everyone involved. But while audiences may have loved the movie, critics were a bit more split, with some critics pointing to the fact that it felt like a collection of one-liners and sketches than it did an actual movie, but all of them pointing to the chemistry between Julia and Huston and the beautiful gothic and noir-inspired style of the film as the best parts of the movie. And with all of that out of the way, it's time to dive into our favorite family's first big screen outing.
Children, we're starting! Put down that antenna.
Now, the movie does open with the fun little stinger of the Addams Family torturing Christmas carolers, which is actually a reference to one of the original cartoons published in The New Yorker. But before we dive into the plot of the movie, let's take a step back and talk about two of the things that make this movie stand out the most: the score and the cinematography. The score was composed by Marc Shaiman, who'd already been working in Hollywood for a number of years, even having worked with Sonnenfeld on Misery just a year earlier. And the score that Shaiman wrote for this movie is pitch perfect. It captures the gothic romantic vibe of the family so incredibly well. As for the cinematography, even just the opening scene with the carolers and the real opening with Thing running through the house just shows us exactly what this movie is going to look like. Because of the slower film stock picked by Sonnenfeld, all of the dark colors feel like the darkest version possible. Even this shot of the Addams Family clock I think shows this well. Look how dark not just Morticia's dress is, but how dark the brown wood behind the clock is. Even Gomez standing in Fester's room monologuing about how he's been gone for 25 years does a great job of showcasing what the movie will look like. Fester's room is dark, gray, and covered in spiderwebs, but it's when we meet Morticia that the movie really loudly announces what it's going to be and look like. Like I said, it was a stated goal that Morticia would have her own motivated eye lighting, and I think that showing that within the first couple minutes of the movie was the absolute right call. Plus, this scene also introduces us to how horny Gomez and Morticia are for each other, and that Gomez feels every feeling at roughly 110% at all times. I particularly love Morticia saying,
Do it again.
and Gomez fencing with the blinds to keep the sun out of his wife's face. And we get the first of the many times Morticia speaks French.
Tish, that's French.
Oui.
As for the plot of the movie, we learn that Gomez's brother Fester has been missing for 25 years, and the family are getting ready to host their yearly seance in an attempt to contact Fester in the great beyond. We're also introduced to the family's lawyer and his wife, Tully and Margaret Alford, played by the always wonderful Dan Hedaya and Dana Ivey, respectively. And the introduction of these two is one of the most fun sequences of the movie, specifically the way Gomez throws a sword at his head immediately upon him closing the doors to the office, which leads to this really fun and well choreographed duel that both of them actually did for real. The only time we really cut to a stunt actor is when Gomez does these super over the top flips. The introduction of Tully really is what kicks the plot into gear. We learn that this guy is broke and that he borrowed money from a loan shark named Abigail Craven, and she and her son have come to collect. And immediately Tully notices that Craven's son Gordon bears a striking resemblance to the missing Fester Addams. And of course, Christopher Lloyd does an absolutely brilliant job playing both Gordon and Fester. So the three hatch a plan for Gordon to infiltrate the Addams family so that they can steal the fortune housed in their vault. Once Gordon is introduced to the family as Fester, most everyone seems willing to instantly accept him, the exception being Wednesday, who has a fascination with the Bermuda Triangle and doesn't buy the idea that Fester has not only been lost there, but that he somehow escaped. I really like that she's suspicious immediately, and later on Pugsley even asks her if she thinks he is the real Fester, and she says,
Father says so, but I think Mother isn't sure.
There's also this great scene of Morticia not being suspicious as she helps Fester unpack his bag and finding a crowbar, dynamite, and cyanide before saying,
As if we'd run out.
The next morning, Fester begins settling in / really outing himself as not really part of the family. Gomez takes him to the vault to watch home movies, and Fester can't remember a single thing about their time growing up together, forgetting the vault combination and their secret password. But it's just after this that the family really gets suspicious when they all go to an auction where they've donated a gold-plated finger trap, which Gomez and Morticia buy back for $50,000 after getting really horny for each other in the middle of the auction. But on their way back home, Fester tries the finger trap and asks how it works, which makes the entire family become suspicious because according to Gomez,
he wore that finger trap for 2 years. Mother had to teach him to eat with his feet.
Once the family arrive home, Fester calls his fake mom / fake doctor, and she comes and puts the Addams family's minds at ease by telling them that they're experiencing displacement. Honestly, it's a real paper-thin explanation, but Gomez doesn't care. He just wants to be excited about having his brother back. Ironically, this is just about where Fester starts to fit into the family more and more. He sees Pugsley and Wednesday working on a swordplay scene for a talent show at school, and he helps them improve, making the scene feel a bit more realistic, and the three really start to bond. However, Craven demands that Fester miss the show so that they can finally break into the vault and be done with it, which really upsets him, so he decides to just ignore her and head to the talent show anyway. And the performance that Wednesday and Pugsley give here is just perfect. I especially love the way that after they've sprayed blood all over each other, the stage, and the audience, we cut to see half the audience completely covered in blood and stone-faced while the Addams family rise for a standing ovation. The next morning, Fester's fake mom / fake doctor says that Fester must leave and head back to the Bermuda Triangle, which prompts the family to throw a massive party for him, inviting everyone from the Addams family clan. And I just have to say, this transition of Gomez and Morticia dancing in the empty banquet room with her pulling the sheet to reveal the room is now now completely full and the party is in swing is one of my favorite moments in the entire movie. The party sequence for me is the highlight of the movie. We get to see a bunch of other characters from the larger Addams Family clan, including my personal favorite, Cousin It, who quickly meets and falls head over heels for Margaret. We also get to meet the Amor twins, who reveal to Tully that Fester is actually the eldest Addams, meaning technically the entire estate is his, but more on that in just a moment, because I want to spend some time on the Mamushka sequence. I just love the whole thing, and I think the choreography is amazing, and the song is so stupid and catchy, it just gets lodged in your brain, and this is where Fester is finally fully integrated back into the Addams family. Unfortunately, right as he's riding high off of feeling like he belongs to this wonderful family, Tully and Craven kick the rest of the family members out of the house, saying that it's Fester's house and he doesn't want them staying there because he actually hates Gomez. From here, we get a fun little sad montage of the Addams family going out and trying to make it in the normal world. We've got Wednesday and Pugsley selling their version of lemonade, Thing becoming a courier, and of course Morticia becoming a preschool teacher. And fun fact, to make the kids cry here, director Barry Sonnenfeld told all of them that they were almost done for the day. There was just one more thing that they needed to take care of, and that was giving all of them a measles shot.
And I'm not proud of this.
The movie finally comes to a head with Morticia having had enough and going to the house demanding to speak to Fester. So our villains tie her to a torture rack and begin unsuccessfully trying to torture her. Luckily, Thing followed her to the house and runs back home to tell Gomez what's going on, and I love Gomez crashing through the window and immediately and briefly dueling with Tully again until Craven pulls a gun. But this is the last straw for Fester. He can't take his overbearing mother anymore, so he opens up a book called Hurricane Irene, which brings a hurricane into the room because of course it does. And in the course of this, Fester is struck by lightning and Tully and Craven are flung into freshly dug graves.
Are they dead? Does it matter?
In the epilogue, it's finally fully revealed that this has been the real Fester all along. He's just been suffering from amnesia, which the lightning strike obviously cured. We see that Margaret and Cousin It are now together, and it's revealed that Morticia is pregnant, and the movie ends with the family digging up graves together, just like the loving family that they are. So 35 years later, what is the legacy of the Addams family? Well, I think it's one of the most important movies in the millennial movie canon. It's where most of us first came across goths and goth culture for the first time, and it's something you either love or you think is silly. I also just really love the family aspect found here. They all love and care for each other, but just in their own unique way. They're different and they don't even recognize it because all that matters to each of them is being their authentic selves. There would be a sequel released a couple years later in 1993 called Addams Family Values that saw the entire cast, director, and writer return, and to be honest, I think Family Values is actually an even better movie. It helps that Joan Cusack is the main antagonist and she's just absolutely eating every scene she's in. But sadly, Raul Julia would pass away in 1994 from a stroke, and after that, everyone agreed that this version of the Addams family was done. Anjelica Huston in particular was very adamant that she could not be Morticia again without her Gomez, and I just absolutely adore that. I also don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the definitive version of the Addams family for most people today. Although there is the Wednesday show over on Netflix, but I just don't really count that since it's so much more focused on Wednesday as the lead character and not so much the family. But let me know in the comments, would you guys like to see a video on Addams Family Values or even Wednesday, I guess? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. It truly means the world. And as always, a very special thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. You all truly make these videos possible. If you're curious about joining the Patreon, there's a link in the description below. Patrons get early ad-free access to videos, access to an exclusive Discord server, and they get to help me choose what movies get covered on the channel. We release new videos covering all of your childhood favorites every Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.